from turning over a new leaf in the way he fights to already considering hanging up the gloves. Here's how Jake Paul changed his fighting style after he lost to Tommy Fury. And let's just say he's done with his old ways. The YouTuber turned boxer suffered his first professional defeat at the hands of Tommy Fury, but it seems like he's taken the loss as a learning experience. Paul has admitted his unbeaten record doesn't mean squat when it comes to his other life goals. He realized that his identity was too closely tied to winning and being undefeated. Now, he just wants to be happy, love himself, and have eternal confidence regardless of any situation. Jake is also changing up his fighting style for his next match. He admitted that his legs were weak going into the Fury bout, and it ended up being a major disadvantage. Also, the way he cut weight was just plain wrong. Normally, a fighter goes through a 12-week camp, so when they lose weight, it's somewhat sustainable and you still have the strength to fight. But Jake was a little short on time, so he squeezed it all in the span of 7 weeks. Now that is dedication. To no one's surprise though, while he did make weight, he just wasn't strong enough to take Fury and ultimately lost. He knows he needs to switch things up and be on his A game, especially because of what I'm about to tell you. If you thought the drama with Jake Paul was over, think again, because the social media sensation is back in the ring and he's gunning for a rematch against Tommy Fury. Back in February of 2023, these two duked it out in a high-profile fight in Saudi Arabia, headlining an ESPN pay-per-view event. But despite Jake being a surprising betting favorite, Tommy TNT Fury delivered a jab-filled performance for 8 rounds, sending Paul packing with a late knockdown. But the story doesn't end there. Following his defeat, Jake activated his rematch clause, and even though Fury didn't have the option to agree, Paul did. However, it looks like he's had a change of heart, and now Jake's sights are set on Nate Diaz. Does that mean the Fury rematch is off the table? Absolutely not. In a recent interview with Sky Sports, Paul made it clear that he and Fury are going to have a rematch. And why not? Their first fight was insane, entertaining the masses and breaking records with the highest pay-per-view buys in boxing for the past 2 years. But a fight isn't the only thing Paul should be focusing on. After his loss against Fury, Jake's best bet is to focus on MMA, mainly because he might already be the best boxer he can ever be. Jake Paul is a talented guy, but let's not kid ourselves. He's not exactly on the fast track to becoming a world champion. Despite his attempts at trash-talking Saul Canelo Alvarez, he's not even close to earning a title fight. That said, the man can fight. He's got a pretty decent jab, which he uses to size up his opponents and set them up for that killer overhand, right? And if that right hand lands flush, it's lights out, baby. Just ask Tyron Woodley. But let's not forget about Jake's other secret weapon, his low stance. By narrowing down and committing his weight to his jabs, he's able to pack even more power into those punches. But it seems like his boxing abilities have reached their limit. While he's great and all, he's never going to be a world champion like he always said he would. So there isn't really anything left for him to prove. With Jake Paul's boxing career reaching its peak, he's running out of viable opponents to fight. Sure, he's got a rematch against Tommy Fury lined up, but after that, who else is left for him to take on? The answer is simple: KSI. These two social media stars have been at each other's throats for years now, and it's about time they settle the score in the ring. This is a grudge match that's just begging to be promoted, with both sides flinging insults and accusations at each other left and right. If they do fight, it'll be a clash of egos and a test of willpower like no other. But let's face it, after KSI, there's not much else left for Jake Paul to do. He's reached the top of the mountain and there's nowhere else to go. Sure, he could try and take on some professional boxers, but they're going to offer him a level of difficulty he's just not equipped to handle. So MMA seems to be the only way forward for him, and in a way, he's already laid the groundwork for it. Whether you're talking about the UFC or the world of combat sports in general, hype means money, and most of the hype usually comes from feuds. In the time that Jake has been an active fighter, he hasn't just trash-talked his opponents, but just about everyone he can think of, most of them being from the realm of MMA. Paul caught a lot of flack for cherry-picking his opponents in the boxing ring. It's like he only wanted to fight people who were out of their element or too old to move well. First, there was Ben Askren, a wrestler at heart whose striking leaves much to be desired. Then there was Tyron Woodley, an older wrestler whose striking was only effective in MMA because of low kicks and takedowns. Let's not forget about Anderson Silva, who's nearing 50. Sure, he's a legendary fighter, but time catches up with us all. It's no wonder people are itching to see Jake get in the ring with MMA fighters in their element. These fighters know the game, and they won't be out of their depth like Askren and Woodley. Paul has been talking smack about MMA fighters for years, and they're lining up to show him what's what. The PFL signing him only adds fuel to the fire. It's a smart move, capitalizing on his trash talk and getting people all hyped up for his fights. But it's also a risky move because now he has to back up all that talk. Because you see, Paul has ready-made matchups in MMA. If he wants to prove he's not just a one-trick pony, he'll have to take on MMA fighters in their natural habitat, the cage. Unfortunately for him, most of the UFC fighters are tied up with contracts. But there are still some who are willing to risk it all for a chance to take on the social media superstar. Anthony Pettis, who is currently with the PFL, has already thrown his hat into the ring, and who can blame him? A win against the problem child would be a massive feather in his cap. But if we're talking about box office draws, then Nate Diaz is the man to beat. He's a free agent, and he's got beef with the Paul brothers that has been simmering for years. But let's not forget about the two men who've already tasted defeat at the hands of Jake Paul. Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley are both free agents now, and they're probably itching to redeem themselves. The PFL could build a whole story around this. Two fighters seeking vengeance against the YouTuber who dared to challenge them on their own turf, which honestly is a better idea than going for a rematch with Fury, because another loss to Tommy would end Jake's career. In his post-fight interview, Jake was quick to list out all the reasons why he lost his fight to Fury. Falling ill twice, an injured arm, and feeling flat are just some of the excuses he pulled out of his hat. While he did say that these weren't meant to be excuses, it was hard not to see them as such. If he loses a rematch, he won't have any more excuses up his sleeve. A second loss to the same opponent would be devastating for his career. Sure, he can claim that the first loss was just a fluke, but if he gets pummeled in a rematch, he'll have nowhere to hide. Not only will his brand take a hit, but his prospects as a fighter will be damaged as well. He won't be able to chalk up another loss to anything other than his lack of skill or preparation. And he might just need to look into retirement altogether, which is already on his mind, by the way. After suffering his first loss in the boxing ring against Tommy Fury, it seems like the dude was seriously considering throwing in the towel for good. In a recent interview with Sports Illustrated's Chris Mannix, Paul shared that after losing his first boxing match, he considered quitting boxing altogether. He described the feeling as not fun at all and questioned his purpose in the sport. But we all know he isn't one to back down, so he ultimately decided to continue his boxing career. Instead of quitting, he decided to make some serious changes to his approach. Jake parted ways with head trainer BJ Flores and brought back Shane Mosley, who was in his corner for his boxing debut. He also enlisted veteran boxing coach Theo Chambers and former super middleweight contender Jaleon Love as part of his training team. And now, he's ready to take on one of the biggest names in combat sports, Nate Diaz, in what Jake calls a do-or-die fight. So, from already considering hanging up the gloves to completely rethinking the way he's been boxing, this was how Jake Paul changed his fighting style after losing to Tommy Fury.